Hi, this is Gigi from Kauai Community College. In this problem, we are asked to find the derivative and simplify. The function is cosine square of x. Now, depends on when in the course you have learned about the derivatives, right? So before you have learned about the chain rule. Okay, now if you're like, oh, what's the chain rule? Well, if you haven't learned the chain rule, then we must proceed with thinking cosine square. Well, anything square is a thing multiplied by itself. Okay, cosine times cosine. Okay, so before the chain rule, we have to use the product rule, okay, because this is a product. So most likely this question is being asked either right after you learn the product rule or right after you learn the chain rule. Okay, so product rule said that if you have a function f and a function g, multiply to each other, and you are taking the derivative, and I shorthand the derivative notation there, then it will be the derivative of the first times the second plus the derivative of the second times the first. And that is the product rule, and that's what we're going to apply here, right? Where the first and the second are the derivative of cosine, or the function cosine of x. Okay, so let's apply that. The derivative of f of x is, the derivative first of cosine of x is negative sine of x multiplied by cosine of x. Now, I forgo the parentheses there where it said cosine of x, just so that it looks a little bit better and it looks nicer, but you should know that x is the argument here for this function, plus the derivative of cosine of x times cosine of x, which would give you another negative sine x times cosine of x. So really, you have the derivative of f of x is negative 2 sine of x multiplied by cosine of x, right? So that is if you were applying the product rule. Now, after you have learned the chain rule, okay, if you have learned, this is after the chain rule. Okay, now, after the chain rule is proven to you and you have learned the chain rule, you will see that f of x is a composite function, okay, where the inside function, and you can see this as cosine of x squared. Okay, that's how that is written in trigonometry, but really it's cosine of x, and then you square that function. So the outside function is x squared, and the inside function is cosine of x. Okay, so the chain rule said that if you have a function f of g of x, and you are taking the derivative with respect to x, then it would be the derivative of the function f, which is the outside function, evaluated at g of x, we keep the inside the same, multiplied by the inside derivative, which is the derivative of g of x. That's the chain rule. Okay, so if you have learned about the chain rule, that's what that said. The derivative of the outside evaluated at g of x multiplied by the derivative of the inside. The outside being something squared. And we know the derivative of something squared is 2 times that thing, right? So the derivative of f of x in this case would be, bring the exponent down. Okay, so that would be 2 cosine of x to the first power, that's the power rule, and that's this part right here, multiplied by the inside derivative, which is the derivative of cosine of x. And the derivative of cosine of x is negative sine of x. Okay, so to simplify, you would say, oh, hey, that would be negative times 2, that's negative 2. And if we just write sine of x in the front and then cosine of x in the back, your answer is exactly the same. Okay, so one way using the product rule, if you haven't learned the chain rule, and then if you have learned the chain rule, then apply the chain rule for this problem. So that should clear up question of which rule am I using when, right? It depends on the progression. And also, when do you use the definition of derivative? Well, when you don't really yet know the basic derivatives.